Hello, this is Ellen Madono, and I'm speaking to you from Tokyo Homeopathy. My mission is to get beginners started using a homeopathy that is reliable. They can expect results. The first step is to learn emergency medicine, or the medicine that you would do in your household without anything but a handbook. And I'm suggesting that this is a good handbook. There are other ones out there. I thought I'd go over the handbook with you for at least a few chapters so that you can get a good feeling for how you use this kind of handbook and what the author means. The author's name is Colin Griffith. He's a British homeopath who's been working for the last 30 years doing homeopathy, and he's led a very active life. He first published a book that's mainly for homeopaths. Later, he published this book for the person who wants to just practice in their home to avoid most of the medicines and surgeries that are your only other alternative, according to what the media would like you to believe. So this is an alternative, but it's based on something more than just an advertisement. Dr. Griffith is the father of 4 children, and his daughter's a homeopath. I think another child is a homeopath. And he wrote this handbook to get you started, because he saw that his own patients needed to get started doing their own homeopathy. If you look at the chapters here, you will see things that are of greater interest to you, or at the moment you need that information. If you know how to use the handbook, you will be confident that even if you haven't read everything in the book, you still can read the handbook and figure it out by the seat of your pants. Furthermore, my goal is to get you to do more than just use a handbook. But for the time being, it's important to use a handbook. You need to start somewhere. And I'll probably cover the first 3 chapters at least, because this is what everyone needs, regardless of whether you have children or not. The end of the book is about making your own first aid kit, and I hope it'll give you a sense that you have choices to make. Now, homeopathy is one of the what's called alternative medicines, and people think of it as complementary. Some examples of alternative medicines are chiropractic, Chinese medicine or Reiki, and homeopathy is among them. So he often suggests that you look at other alternative medicines as well. There's another kind of medicine, a way of framing homeopathy. It's complementary. It can be used alongside what we call allopathy. Allopathy is the homeopath's term for medicines that rely on pharmaceutical drugs and surgery. He wants to teach you how to think homeopathically. It's not just a matter of remembering this remedy does this or that. You can look that up in a book, and at any stage you rely on reference books, and you don't worry so much about remembering. It's more important to think homeopathically. Another consideration is homeopathy in any way dangerous? And most of the reason why people think it might be dangerous is because it helps the body to eliminate toxins, so you might get diarrhea or vomit or some way to get rid of toxins in your body. these are usually not dangerous or anything. But generally, conventional medicine is suppressive. In other words, the object is to prevent the body from doing what it's doing. It could be that it's overreacting, and it's important to prevent the body from overreacting. It can save lives to take someone to the emergency room. The proof of this is that homeopaths use allopathy. It's not that the two are incompatible at all, or that homeopathy is against allopathy. It's an alternative, and it's complementary. That means it can go with allopathy. Collins says that you should have no trouble ordering remedies. Actually, we found this to be untrue during COVID. The pharmacies were very busy, and if you actually had COVID and you had to rely on the pharmacies to send it to you, it would be much too late. I heard that homeopaths in New York were running around delivering remedies from their own kit to people who needed it desperately. And then also, there have been attacks by the pharmaceutical industry on homeopathic pharmacies. They're trying to enforce pharmaceutical testing on homeopathic remedies. I can't get into this, but the two kinds of medicine are so different that to require pharmaceutical testing of remedies that are not patented, that are very inexpensive, is simply unreasonable. It's mainly to prevent the use of homeopathy. So this kind of legislation is happening in the United States at the moment. I don't know how successful they are. And when you go to your pharmacies, sometimes you need to contact them by email and tell them what you need, because not every remedy is in their shop where you can see the listing of remedies. If your homeopath asks for a remedy, sometimes it's not in the shop. You have to ask by email. The bottom line is, it's important to have your own household supplies. Homeopathic remedies are very inexpensive. I buy mine from India, and they're really inexpensive. But even bought from anywhere, they're just nowhere close to the cost of pharmaceutical medicines. And they last forever. So it's very good to get your own kit. And the kit will be described at the end of this book. And you'll understand what the reasoning is for this. I'm going to be teaching my students polarity analysis. So there are certain remedies that you want, because these are the remedies that appear in polarity analysis. And when you make choices, you need to sometimes call a homeopath. You can't do everything yourself. The book is not a replacement for homeopathic training. And sometimes you need to be calling doctors and allopathic medical professionals. So this book is kind of help for you to make decisions about what kind of help you need in what kind of situations. It's usually very difficult to make a major mistake in homeopathy. The biggest one is that you could delay necessary care. If care has to be immediate, you can't be waiting around. And sometimes the homeopathic care is very efficient. You grab your own remedy kit and you go to the emergency room. On the way to the emergency room, you give your patient the right remedy, and sometimes you just turn around. You don't need the emergency room, but you certainly want to have all your bases covered should there be any kind of dangerous emergency. With homeopathy, you can treat all injuries, colds, and flus, at least in the beginning stages. Not if you have a tremendous infection or something, but these familiar remedies that he's mentioning, if you begin using homeopathy, these are names that you will know because you use them for many different purposes. And this kind of a handbook will kind of clue you into that, but it's not like you memorize these. Sometimes the handbook is not enough and you need other resources. So my intention is to help you to learn what those other resources are and how you use them. So I teach polarity analysis for the next step beyond a handbook, how you use resources that are much closer to what homeopaths use. This book is meant to help you to recognize what is possible and what help you can expect from professionals, both allopathic professionals and homeopathic professionals. The main purpose is to learn to think homeopathically and to recognize when you need help and when you don't. You need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of more serious pathologies. This book will help you with that. And you should know when to trust your instincts. If you've been thinking about this, your instincts will be better informed. Basically, this book is a homeopathic management support. He says that it's impossible to do constitutional analysis, but I think with the use of polarity analysis, it is possible to do constitutional analysis, but it takes more training. Some key words here are the words acute. Acute means the problem will either kill you or go away, which is, I guess that isn't a very good definition. A better definition would be something that will be healed rather quickly, and it happened a short while ago. Acutes can be something that is deadly. It's not that it's less dangerous. And subacutes are something that actually happened long time ago, so that it's already become a part of you. It's chronic. So the subacute is attached to an acute problem. So sometimes when you use a deep analysis system like polarity analysis, you actually hit on this remedy for the subacute problem. You're able to go much deeper than you would be using ordinary homeopathy. So the next part of this discussion is going to be exactly what is in this book. One thing you'll learn is that a problem with just one part of the body is never separate from the rest of the body. The tendencies of the whole body are expressed in a single part. This book is for people who already kind of get it, that chemical drugs will prevent symptoms of injuries or fevers or flu or whatever from totally healing. This is called suppression. And so you're learning this kind of medicine to prevent suppression. This book contains detailed information about first aid for emergencies, and there are clear instructions of conditions which should be treated in the hospital, and suggestions of what you might use during these kinds of emergencies. You use it complementary. The two go together. At the end of the book, there is a very short description of 50 remedies, and finally how to make your own first aid kit. Especially if you learn polarity analysis, you don't need to remember these sketches. As you begin to study, you'll see that you're repeating the same information over and over again for different kinds of problems. And you will be able to remember simply because of repetition. This is a thinking homeopathically skill. So eventually you'll gain that skill. And you'll see that remedies have personalities, and they have their own kind of sphere of influence where they can help the body in what kinds of ways, under what kinds of circumstances. And so you'll gradually learn these. He gives the example of 4 different remedies. All of these remedies are used in both chronic and acute problems. We have Rustox, which is good for rheumatic pains, and it feels better by rubbing it. It likes heat, and they want to keep moving to prevent stiffness. Then there's Bryonia that has rheumatic pains that are the opposite, from staying still. They want to stay very still. And Arsenicum album, which covers diarrhea symptoms. These are all very big remedies, so they cover much more than what he's reporting here. And then there's Veratrum album, this 4th one here, where you see also diarrhea. And so how would you differentiate them, would be the question, okay? So all of these remedies are used in both chronic and acute cases, and all of them heal inflammation. There's a kind of inflammation that takes place in your bowels, and therefore you have diarrhea, or there's an inflammation that takes place on your muscles, and therefore you have rheumatic pains. So what you would learn eventually is that these first 2, Rustox and Bryonia, are more typical in injuries. And Arsenicum album and Veratrum album, these second 2, are more typical in food poisoning. But, you learn this over time. It happens that all of these remedies are used in fever. What is fever? Fever is a kind of inflammation. It could be an inflammation of the brain. It could be inflammation of mucous membranes, but all of them create heat, redness, pain, and swelling. These are the kind of classical signs of inflammation. So all of these create the signs of inflammation, but they affect the body in different ways. And so that's what you will be learning. Another thing you'll be learning about is the overreaction of remedies. When remedies tune your body up, then you can begin to eliminate toxins. It could be too fast for you, what you want. And it's important to be able to evaluate, is this overreaction something that I can handle, or something that needs some herbal help, or is it something I should slow down my use of the remedy? You need to be able to evaluate the situation when you're getting these kinds of overreactions. So the book will talk about that kind of situation. What are remedies made from? Well, apis is made from the bee, the honeybee. It's squished up and made into a remedy. Belladonna and Lycopodium are, China too, are all plants. And then amethyst is a healing stone. It's a gem. Actually, it's not very common in the normal homeopathic literature, but Colin Griffith is into this kind of unusual remedy, and he introduces these remedies, which I think is pretty interesting. And you can buy them at the pharmacy. It's not that they don't exist, but they aren't in the typical book that is of this kind. Okay. Now, are these remedies dangerous the way belladonna is a poison? Is it dangerous actually? And he explains how it isn't dangerous because it's so diluted. It's mainly handling overreactions of the body, or what's called aggravations. And then finally, the other question is, what kind of remedies would be useful in my household? And through reading this book, you'll be able to compile a set of remedies that would be useful in your household. Finally, he talks about potencies and which potencies you would use. He suggests a number of potencies, and I'm not always in agreement with him, because I know that some of you think that it's a lot to have several potencies of one remedy. And I'll make some suggestions about how you can get around these problems of potencies, because not everyone wants to stock many potencies. And then he starts talking about the kind of things that you can observe in the patient. Does the fever make the patient white or red? Or these kinds of useful observations is another thing that you will learn to do, so that you can, one, look up useful information, and two, report to your homeopath useful information. You'll understand these kinds of objective symptoms, how they can be used. There are also subjective symptoms. They have to do with how the patient feels. Is the little girl clinging to her father? That's clinging is a kind of a symptom. It expresses her lack of confidence having a fever. These kinds of things, you will actually pick up on them, because you'll realize that this kind of subjective symptom is an expression of the patient. So the clinging child is often a pulsatilla. They're weepy and dependent. You learn to recognize this. There are other ones that are clinging. And you learn that Bryonia just doesn't want to move. Don't move me and don't bother me. The kind of attitude that they express. Rustox is moving around all the time, whether they have a fever or they have a sprained ankle. It doesn't matter. They still have this general tendency. So what are the general tendencies of a remedy? You learn that. Finally, you'll learn how to estimate whether the remedy worked and when you should repeat it. Do you need to repeat it? These kinds of things take some judgment, and it's very important to understand how this kind of thing works. Finally, he gives you some don't do this kind of stuff. I'm not sure how important this is. My cases don't fail or because of this kind of a reason. But he's very, he has many ideas about what you shouldn't do. I'm not so sure that my failures are due to this kind of advice, but he's done it for 30 years, so certainly he knows more than I do. And finally, he discusses tendencies that we have in general, and you can learn about these different tendencies, and they help you to select remedies. This is particularly useful when you start selecting remedies for chronic cases, not so much acute cases. And there's this word constitutional. Constitutional treatment is generally not what he's talking about here, but he can't help but talk about it because it's part of even acute. There's something that's subacute that is necessarily, basically constitutional. And so you'll learn about what does it mean to have a problem that is deep set in the mind and the body. So this has been Ellen Madono speaking to you from Tokyo Homeopathy. And I hope I have given you some encouragement to begin reading this book with me. Thank you.